the NTA. I'm Ruth Aguela. Nigeria and Egypt have reached a partnership agreement focused on food production, water management and climate adaptation in crop cultivation. This development was highlighted during the Egypt-Nigeria Business Forum held in Cairo. The Nigerian delegation was led by Foreign Affairs Minister Yusuf Tugar, who attended alongside Agriculture Minister Abubakar Kyari and the Minister of Water Resources, both of whom presented at the forum. Abubakar Kyari, Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, emphasized that the discussions underscored the importance of technical collaboration and knowledge exchange between Nigeria and Egypt. He noted that Egypt's expertise in crop and livestock production, food technology and water resource management offers valuable opportunities for Nigeria to learn and adapt. The minister announced that both countries have agreed to form technical teams to initiate joint projects supported by their respective governments and private sectors. Furthermore, Nigeria and Egypt signed an agreement to establish a comprehensive partnership aimed at combating terrorism and extremism while promoting peace and sustainable development across Africa. Foreign Affairs Minister Yusuf Tugar welcomed the proposal to establish a Nigeria-Egypt Chamber of Commerce this year, which he believes will enhance trade and investment opportunities between the two countries, particularly in agriculture, a vital sector of Nigeria's economy. In other news, the federal government has ordered the immediate relocation of the victims of the petrol tanker explosion from the Suleja General Hospital to other tertiary medical institutions where they can receive better care. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, who led federal government's delegation to sympathize with the victims and their families, disclosed that President Tinubu directed the immediate constitution of high-powered investigation committee to ascertain the remote and immediate causes of petrol tanker explosions across the country. Saliu Abdullahi Gwanara will tell us more.
From September 2024 till date, Nigeria has reported records of 4 petrol tanker accidents that have claimed more than 265 lives. The latest one at Diko Junction in Niger State that has reawakened the consciousness of the authority with a view to finding an end to this avoidable accident so far claimed more than 80 lives, including this one before the very eyes of the federal government delegation.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is deeply saddened by what has happened, and he has asked us to come here to see the situation in the hospital especially. We have just gone around the wards and we've seen those that are very critically injured, and as we have even visited here, one of them sadly passed on just now, and we are told that this is the 8th victim of this fire explosion that has just passed, and what we are seeing here is the dire need of an emergency, a more emergency situation which the federal government is taking. The Honorable Minister of Health, NEMA, and all agencies of government that are involved will ensure that all these victims are immediately evacuated and taken to intensive care units of the immediately available tertiary hospitals here.
The role my minister is supposed to play, ensuring that we give a human face to the activities that took place, and also ensuring that all the possible support we give the family and the family of those departed, the souls departed, and the families that are in the hospital. We do our best to ensure that we provide support for them in, based on what the president has directed us to do.
Intensive engagement among stakeholders from the public and private sector that is underway with a view to ascertain the remote and immediate causes of accident involving petrol tankers might be what is required for future safety of lives and property.
All critical stakeholders are going to meet to find a lasting solution to this. It's an unacceptable situation where people, Nigerians, fellow Nigerians, will continue to lose their lives as a result of these people trying to scoop fuel because a fuel tanker has fallen. Of course, all the recommendations will be put together and be forwarded to Mr. President so that a final stop will be put into this. But like I said, the President is greatly saddened by this, and he has directed that everything possible should be done.
The delegation, which includes the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Nentawe Yilwatda, and heads of agencies under the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation, including the Director General of NTA, Saliu Abdul Hamid Dembos, visited the palace of the Emir of Suleja, Muhammad Awal Ibrahim, from Diko Junction in Niger State. Salihu Abdullahi Gwanara, NTA News.
Similarly, the Northern senators have expressed deep sadness over the recent tragic petrol tanker explosion at Diko Junction that have claimed numerous lives and left many others injured. In a statement, Chairman of the Forum, Senator Abdulaziz Yaradua, said the incident highlights the need for greater vigilance and enforcement of safety regulations across roads. The statement noted that the incident could have been avoided if the enforcement agencies had taken precautionary steps. The forum called on relevant agencies, including the Federal Road Safety Corps, to ensure that all tankers and heavy-duty vehicles are roadworthy and adhere to strict safety standards, as damage caused by such a breakdown is unacceptable and preventable. While condoling the victims' families, the forum urged Nigerians to refrain from scooping fuel in the event of such incidents, as it can have devastating consequences. We turn to other issues. Minister of Women Affairs, Iman Suleiman Ibrahim, has commenced visitation of the over 91 orphanages in the nation's capital, in line with the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Tinubu, and in response to meeting the needs of vulnerable children across the country. The minister, during her visit to the first orphanage in Gwagwalada area of the FCT, explained that the move is aimed at curbing ill treatment in such homes and making them more responsive to the well-being of the children.
City would happen to be a pilot state for everything that we do, even adoption protocols, even orphanages, the certification. We're going to review everything so that we make sure that, an instrument that is used to protect people like an orphanage should serve that purpose. The overall benefit is a strengthened response to social protection.
The case and call to action to present the Federal Capital Territory as a project pilot.
He should therefore emphasize the commitment of the renewed hope agenda of President Bola Tinubu, that it is to ensure adequate social protection of the citizenry, especially the vulnerable. She donated food items for the upkeep of the children on behalf of the First Lady. The initiative, according to the minister, is a nationwide project with Abuja as the first place. Now imagine a world where every person is a puzzle piece that fits perfectly into the grand mosaic of humanity. A world where differences are celebrated and uniqueness is the norm. Well, January 20th marks International Day of Acceptance, a reminder that every individual deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. It is a day to challenge our biases, break down barriers, and embrace the beauty of diversity. Well, as we celebrate, let's envision a world where acceptance is the foundation upon which we build our relationships, communities, and societies. A world where everyone can thrive just as they are. Now, joining us to explore the transformative power of acceptance is a compassionate psychiatrist, Dr. Muftau Mohammed, from the University of Abuja Teaching Hospital, Gwagwalada, here in Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Mohammed.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, I can call you Doctor, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Now, when we look at the significance of the day, looking at how people can cultivate self-acceptance and also society embracing inclusivity, what does it speak to us,
Well, acceptance, the International Day of Acceptance, is actually an important day to celebrate and encourage the inclusion of people with disabilities. We do know that people, humans generally pass through different stages in their lives and maybe have certain conditions or maybe in certain circumstances or situations. But accepting their disabilities, for example, is an important part of their life. We do know that people with mental health conditions, for example, may be at risk of having lots of disabilities, and they may be at risk of experiencing exclusion. Mental health conditions are common. For example, the World Health Organization estimates that 1 in every 4 people is at risk of having a mental health condition in their lifetime. But 90% of those who need mental health care are not having access to evidence-based medications or psychosocial interventions. So one of the major drivers of this huge treatment gap for people with mental health conditions is stigma, the societal, negative societal response to people living with mental health conditions and indeed other disabilities. So it's time really to ensure that individuals living with disabilities accept their situation, and it's also important for the society to ensure that these individuals are included in policies, in practices to ensure their collective well-being.
Okay, Doctor, I would like to digress a bit beyond persons with disabilities. The issue of mental health is very serious and people tend not to talk about it. I'm sure you're aware of that. People tend to, stigmatize persons who have presented themselves as vulnerable to show that they have dealing with one form of mental issue or the other. How can society break that barrier?
Yeah, it's important, as I said. One of the major drivers of the treatment gap for mental health conditions, where 90% of those who need mental health care are not having the care they need, is the stigma. Mental health conditions are common. Since 1 out of every 4 people is at risk of having a mental health condition, it means everyone is really at risk. And mental health is actually a continuum from being perfectly well. We do know the definition of health as being a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So just as health is, mental health is also a continuum. No one would be said to be perfectly mentally healthy. And then the two extremes are being perfectly mentally healthy and then having a mental illness. But we all hover around these two extremes, which means everyone is at risk of having a mental health condition depending on their vulnerabilities. So we should look at this as something affecting everyone, affecting all of us, and everyone is at risk. I think this attitude can really help us in ensuring that we support people living with mental health conditions and ensure their inclusion in activities.
You know, the first step to getting self-help is acceptance, Doctor. And people with mental health, accepting that, of course, is the first goal. But in an environment, like a working environment, how can that be identified? Should they be, form of segregation? Is that necessary? You know, people who have presented themselves in a working environment that they're dealing with one form of mental issue or the other. What would you advise for a working environment?
Yeah, it's important, given the universality or the prevalence of mental health conditions. It's likely we see many people living with mental health conditions in the workplace. And we do know that the World Economic Forum and Harvard University, economists from these two organizations really estimate that mental, neurological, and substance use disorders will cost the global economy $16.3 trillion in the period 2010 to 2030. That's more than cancer, diabetes, and respiratory diseases when you combine these. So, which means most of this is actually due to lost economic productivity. So people living with mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety in the workplace are at risk of being stigmatized, and it really leads to a lot of lost economic benefits because they may not be able to perform optimally, And this amounts to the lost economic productivity. So it's important really for organizations and employees and other people in the society to ensure that people with mental health conditions in the workplace are supported and are linked with the appropriate mental health support for them to realize their full potential and be productive.
Okay, I'd like to also look a bit on the issue of, the plight of persons with disabilities. They face a lot of discrimination because of their disability. Now, there's ability and disability, that's what they say, but it starts with that individual accepting that there is ability in my disability. What would you advise persons with disabilities on the aspect of accepting who they are?
Yeah, it's really critical for people with disabilities to accept who they are. That's the ideal situation where we look at everyone looking at who they are really, not who we expect them to be. So it starts with the individual really to accept their condition. It's something they cannot change. Accepting it is the best strategy. Because that will enable them to really focus on achieving their goals. Because when you do not accept it, for example, there's this tendency you may not be able to focus on achieving your life goals. Not achieving your life goals would further increase your risk of having a mental health condition, for example. And that can just lead to a cycle of dissatisfaction and disability, further disability. So accepting the situation is really critical, and then this can really help in propelling their aspirations forward.
All right, Dr. Muftau Mohammed, we look forward to having a society where values, ethics, and of course, acceptability thrives. Thank you so much for your time on Panorama.
Thank you for having me.
He is a consultant psychiatrist. Let's ponder on those thoughts as we take a break. Stay tuned. Thank you for staying tuned. The 90 Amphibious Battalion of the Nigerian Army in Koko, Delta State, has heightened strategies that will further combat crude oil theft and pipeline vandalism in the Niger Delta region. Defense correspondent Ismail Musa reports that the commanding officer of the battalion, Colonel Oluwale Okedigba, restated this at the 2024 West Africa Social Activities in the state.
The 2024 Annual West African Social Activity WASA is an annual social tradition in the Nigerian Army that seeks to further harmonize personnel and their families by strengthening the existing bonds among different ethnic groups in the barracks community. Devoid of the usual military regimentation, the platform is also an avenue to reward hard work and promote unity among officers and soldiers. The commanding officer of the 90 Amphibious Battalion of the Nigerian Army promised to upscale the domination of its area of responsibility to achieve more success than the preceding year.
The year 2024 was a very successful year for us operationally and administratively. In terms of strategizing on how to go about this year, we are going to sustain our efforts. Crude oil thieves, illegal oil bunkers, pipeline vandals and other criminals have nowhere to hide in the year 2025. Let them be ready, because the 90 Amphibious Battalion is well positioned and ready to ensure that they have no hiding place and all their activities will be countered.
We celebrate not just the traditions of our armed forces, but the spirit and unity that define them. Events like this remind us that behind every soldier is a vibrant individual connected to community and culture.
The unique event is a celebration that marks the end of a successful 2024 training year. Ismail Musa, NTA News.
Talking sports, striker FC of Amak has emerged the winner of the FCT Area Council Cup competition after scoring 4 goals to 3 against Emirate FC of Abuja in a penalty shootout following a goalless draw at regulation time. at a resettlement stadium, Apo, here in Abuja. These and more on Sports Update with Ahmad Zango.